All right, let's get going. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are across the globe, and welcome to this HFS virtual fireside chat with KPMG and Google. Well, there is no real fire here, but but I'm sure this will be a fiery discussion because the topic that we have today is this race to the cloud that we are seeing post the pandemic shock. So my name is Saurabh. My name is Saurabh Gupta. I'm the Chief Research Officer at HFS, and I lead our global research team to really understand the impact that emerging technologies are having across businesses and different industries. And today with me, I have three esteemed panelists from KPMG and Google. And to get things started, gentlemen, do you want to quickly introduce yourselves to the audience? Maybe we start with you, Todd.
Great. Thanks, Rob. So good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Todd Lohr. I lead KPMG's digital consulting group in the US and help clients really focus on the adoption and movement to cloud, as well as all the technologies within the cloud, whether it's data and analytics, automation platforms, integration, artificial intelligence. So really excited for the conversation. Gary, do you want to maybe go next?
Sure. Hello, everybody. My name is Gary Plotkin. I am a partner at KPMG, and I lead our U.S. insurance consulting practice. I've spent just about 30 years in insurance, both technology and operations. And this is a topic obviously near and dear to everyone, but particularly in the insurance industry, where there's a real opportunity to do some leapfrogging, some rationalization of the legacy world, and really change the interaction with the insureds and the brokers and agents. Ken?
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon. My name is Ken Crosby. I'm a director in Google Cloud, one of the industry practice leaders in insurance and financial services. Really excited to be here. It's going to be a great conversation. We're seeing a lot of people wanting to move to cloud, try to figure out what's the best way to get to cloud. How do they overcome the challenges, risk, compliance? So, excited about the conversation today. I look forward to the discussion.
Awesome. Hey, thanks, Ken, Todd, and Gary. And before we get started, I just wanted to remind everyone that we want to make this as interactive as possible. So if you have any questions through the discussion, there's this little Q&A button at the bottom of your screens. So just type in your question, and we'll take some questions as we go along. But we'll also reserve about 10-15 minutes at the end to try and take as many questions from the audience. And look, I think to get us started, this pandemic has created a crisis like no other crisis that we've seen in our lifetime, and fingers crossed, right? There won't be anything like it again that we should see. But like this British Prime Minister Winston Churchill once said, though I don't like him, I like this quote, is never let a good crisis go to waste. And that's what we are seeing happen today, right? And that practically overnight, COVID-19 has flipped the decades old corporate mindset of resisting change. I don't want to change, to one that demands change, right? Of advocating and demanding change. And cloud or cloudification is at the heart of the discussions today. We actually partnered with KPMG just recently and surveyed about 900 different executives across the global 2000 enterprises, across industries, across the globe. And what was very interesting for me, at least, was that 60% of those respondents said that cloud migration has become an absolute necessity post COVID-19. So I'm really keen to dig deeper today into that with our team here today from KPMG and Google to really understand the why, the what, and the how of this whole race to the cloud. So with that, let me get Todd into the conversation and help us lead this thing. with perhaps starting with what KPMG is seeing happening in the market and its clients post this pandemic shock. So, Todd, do you want to get us started?
Absolutely, I would love to. Thanks, Rob. As you referenced with the research that we did, I think it really resonated with what we're also seeing in the market. Broad digital transformation and the movement to the cloud is not certainly anything that's new to any industry or any of our clients. Although I would say adoption has kind of varied between industry. And I think Gary can speak a little bit more to financial services and insurance, where we've seen actually a little bit more adoption pre-pandemic. But other industries have been starting to follow suit. I think what was really interesting about the pandemic, as far as what it did from an investment perspective, is it actually started to accelerate some of those investments. So Saurabh, referencing the survey that you referenced, a lot of the same executives, close to 60% as well, said that their priorities have significantly changed overnight, and if anything, they've started to accelerate some of their technology investments, specifically in larger transformation. And that's not to say organizations weren't already down a path of cloud adoption and then the technology that comes with that. But what I think the pandemic has done, especially in some industries, it has created a shock in the system, and we've seen a lot of organizations accelerating some of those investments. So some of the things that were, the 2 to 3 year roadmap have really been in the mix of everything else that's going on in the business, have been accelerated much faster to be able to get to some of the promise of the underlying technology once they get to the cloud. One of the other things that we saw coming out of that same survey was really the increased investment in emerging technology, and cloud being one of the center technologies to that. But we're also seeing more broadly a convergence in the technology marketplace, where it's not just a single technology, but most organizations are relying on not only re-platforming their business, moving to the cloud to enable that, but really then accelerating the investments in some of the emerging tech stack there, whether it's artificial intelligence, more advanced data and analytics programs, more modern integration capability. We're certainly seeing a lot of emphasis being placed in low-code applications, so getting to the cloud, getting your data there, and then building more modern applications on top of that, whether it's leveraging SaaS applications or low-code applications as well to accelerate the speed. So one of the key themes we're seeing is exactly that. It's the speed of the change. So it's the additional increased investment and kind of the shortened timeline for those horizons, especially in industries that have more kind of existential threat to their business model, and have really forced a catalyst to invest differently in their operating model. So those are some of the broader themes that we're seeing in the market. So Rob, maybe back to you. What specifically are you guys seeing from an analyst perspective?
Yeah, I think in general, completely agree with what you're saying, Todd. I think there is this. I think COVID-19 has created this sort of a burning platform. None of these things are new to us. We've been talking about cloud for, I don't know, man, how long now. And even some of the other technologies, right, like artificial intelligence, smart analytics, automation, IoT, none of these things are new. But there has been this state of denial so far, which has now changed, and now it's just become an imperative to survive. I think when survival is on the line, emerging technologies has become that silver lining to ensure survival. But I think what we are also seeing is there's sort of almost like a tale of two cities, right? Depending on which industry, and within that industry, which segment you are. There is a set of industries who are finding opportunities, right? Especially if you look at banking, financial services, insurance, life sciences, the technology sector, for example. Um, they think that they can actually become even better in terms of how you evaluate enterprise success. So they are finding opportunities right now, and hence they're investing in emerging technologies. But then there's another set of industries, right? If you look at, for example, manufacturing, or if you look at travel, or if you look at retailers, especially, retailers whose business was dominated by brick and mortar sort of retail. And then, look at energy sector. They've got a double whammy, right? Not just COVID-19, but also the price volatility. Uh, those guys are struggling for survival, and they need to invest in technologies to survive. So I think we are seeing, an overwhelming sort of majority of enterprise looking at these emerging technologies, cloud being at the prime of that. But the rationale and the reason behind that sort of varies uh, differently by different industries. So I think while there is a secular trend of emerging technologies, I think the why is very different uh, behind it.
Great. So Ken, maybe you want to weigh in on what you're seeing from a technology perspective, specifically at Google.
Sure, Todd, thanks. So I want to just echo, what you said, right? This change is just transformed overnight, right? And I do think that there are a number of industries that have been in a little bit of a state of denial, right? So like what we're seeing, more broadly is government agencies, lots of legacy systems. We all know this, but now being faced with COVID and this overwhelming demand to satisfy their customers digitally, it's just been overwhelming for them, right? So we have a lot of the government agencies coming to us asking, how do I effectively deal with my call center? How do I effectively deal with building digital agents so that my clients in an omni-channel way can consume information and ask queries from the government? Media and entertainment, we're all working from home. We all see giant spikes in all forms of compute, network, storage. And then again, this unprecedented demand from working from home and trying to create a different experience. So our media and entertainment team has been overwhelmed with just raw compute power requests, but then also customization and tapping into, speaking to those customers now that they're at home. Game companies, 1,000%, 2,000%, 5,000% increase. Everybody's on home on every different platform. Finance and insurance, we've seen a lot of increased risk modeling, looking at fraud. Obviously, new mortgage and loan applications are exploding. A lot of that's data problems, data challenges. We see hedge funds running more and more calculations, more and more quants. So every industry, especially retailers, are all faced with this impact. Some of the things that we're seeing, though, that are very common trends is really, it's about how do all these industries tap into the life events that are happening. So people working from home, parents training children, people buying and selling houses, marriage, divorce. So on our Google side of the house, where we have our ads, YouTube, search, and all those, a lot of companies are asking us, how do I leverage the data that I have, my understanding of my customers, and how do I tap in to these life events now as fast as possible? So that question seems to go across all the different industries, is how do I better engage those customers in their life moments that are happening now, and they want answers in minutes and hours, not days and weeks. So those are some of the key things that we're seeing, and many of the different businesses and industries are really at a tipping point with their ability to stay relevant. Either they can do it or they won't be able to do it.
Great. And Gary, maybe you want to weigh in specific to the industry that you're focused on, some maybe lessons learned or what you're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, across financial services, the move to cloud and the move to digital has been a leading edge activity, with the realization that if you can't be highly competitive from that perspective, then you're going to quickly lose base. What we've seen with the pandemic, though, is a significant acceleration. So capital markets was already moving very quickly in that, and they've simply kept that pace going. And I expect to see continuous investment there. On the banking side, sort of from an intermediary standpoint, there was already a move to digital, right, and sort of online banking. Ken mentioned mortgage origination and the like. But they faced a couple of road bumps and challenges. A good example is PPP. What happened there was, the government turned around very quickly, at least for the initial 2 phases of it, and expected the banks to do their part, and ultimately they could not. And so what most folks didn't see was behind the scenes, the rush to capability, both from a digital standpoint as well as a human capital standpoint, to simply keep up and to realize that these types of events will occur again, and how do they shift to much more of a digital capability and capacity module. On the insurance side, there's been more of a realization and a wake up. There are many aspects of the insurance value chain that are still very manual and very face-to-face. A good example is for all of you that have life insurance products, complex products. It requires someone to come to your house and take fluids and check your weight and the like. That wasn't happening in COVID. So the insurance companies, in this case, the life companies, were suddenly forced to relook at their own models. How do you work with agents, right, in small towns who used to walk into their shop, or they walked into your shop, right, because they knew your grandfather and your parents and the like. All these things have started to shift and have required a significant investment from a technology, digital, and cloud standpoint. One of the biggest changes I'm starting to see is, for a long time, particularly in insurance, we talked about demographics and needing to support demographics in a very different fashion. The millennials didn't want to talk to anyone. They wanted to do it all digitally. High net worth customers wanted direct attention. The boomers also, right? I don't want to have to deal with that. I want to put a phone call in. Well, we're actually starting to see a consolidation of those activities, which is a benefit. But who would have ever thought that my grandfather would be using Instacart, right? And things along those lines. So that is actually helping the business cases and the justification for these types of changes overall. And I expect we'll continue to see those types of changes, and this will not let up.
Great. Yeah, no, we're certainly, I think everyone's on the same page that the change is here and it's accelerating. And it's interesting that the questions are now starting to come in. Okay, so that we all get that. What are we going to do about it? How do we get started? How do we kind of get through? For industries that haven't yet moved there, or for industries that are partway down the journey, what now, what next? So let's maybe switch gears to that portion of the discussion. And Ken, maybe start with you. How do organizations kind of make that mind shift to be cloud first and how they're approaching their tech landscape?
Yeah, sure, Todd. I think one of the things that we try to coach our clients on is just don't boil the ocean. I mean, there's a lot of look, can we move your data center because you don't want to be in the data center business anymore and shift that over? The answer is, of course, yes, we can. But when it comes to digital and some of the things that are happening now in COVID, it's really about taking a step back and trying to understand really what is the business trying to accomplish? What are those KPIs that they need to immediately impact in the next 30, 60, 96 months to really either stay alive or stay relative or stop churn, whatever the metric is. So what we're trying to do is say, let's just take a step back. Let's talk about what it is that are the top 3 initiatives that you need to do. What we're seeing is a common theme again, right? Is across these 3 initiatives is data is like that foundational problem that everyone's struggling with. So how do I take my data? How do I gain more insights out of it? How do I simplify that? How do I enrich it with external data? And then how do I activate against that in the social channels? So we see a lot of demand and a lot of questions there. And the initial impression would be, oh, well, that's a massive big data project. Well, no, it doesn't have to be. So what we've shown here with KPMG and our other partners, how we can take that problem, narrow it down, focus on only the data that you need to focus on for that specific KPI, and deliver something in 90 days. In addition, build out something with machine learning models for customer segmentation, for churn, for lifetime value. The way we've democratized the ability to build these models, it's so much easier than it used to be. So we can deliver something in 90 days, 120 days. We can mask data and deal with the risk and compliance things that we all know that every company's worried about, but still build those models, still build that insights with the data, still enrich that data, And then by the time we get through the risk and compliance, we're all going live together, meeting security, meeting the on-prem requirements. So there's many ways that we can go fast. You know, one of the big things that we've also seen, especially now, it's very timely now, everyone's been trying to do digital agents for a long time. And in the beginning, they weren't that robust and they really weren't that good. But now governments, every industry wants to do those. We can build robust digital agents within 30 days or less. So there are many, many places to start. One of the common themes that we see is really focus on the data, focus on the business KPIs. Let's try to move the needle very quickly. Let's not try to go too far in this COVID time and bite off too much. I guess the last thing I'll wind it out with is we see a lot of this low code, no code. I need to build new digital apps, mobile apps, because I don't have those now, or they're really not meeting the demand. I need to build out a new portal for my agents, my brokers, or whatever different segment of the industry that has that. There are very easy ways now to build it once and port it to different omni-channel ways, and where we can address technology moving very quickly, and then working with the folks like KPMG, where you're dealing with the people, the process, and the culture. And Gary, you and I are working on this right now across multiple different customers. So maybe you might want to kind of add on to that.
Sure. So Ken brings up a lot of good points, and to answer the question, Todd, that you initially laid out, some of it starts with simple foundational aspects. I spend most of my time in insurance, and for some of you may have had similar experience, but the first piece of it, frankly, is culture. For a long time, many of my clients simply said, we're not ready to move into a digital world, right? To shift the way we interact, in our case, our agents, our distributors, our insureds. And suddenly overnight, everybody was home. And every company within, let's call it 2 weeks, had their infrastructures up. Everyone had a little bit of a dance, right? And we're starting to operate in a very different manner. Board of directors who said we have to meet in person have been now meeting digitally, right? Decisions are being made digitally. And so tearing down that initial cultural wall has been one of the key aspects of moving forward. The second foundational piece that I'll add, and Ken started talking about, is data. It is not about boiling the ocean, but it's a realization of what is core data, where does it reside, who owns it, what's its quality, and how do I want to use it? And so frankly, today across financial services, we're still spending a lot of time with clients on pure data governance and data management, all foundational components necessary for this digital and cloud-based move. As we move beyond that, though, I was talking to the panel before we started about sort of what is cloud. And it's about 5 blind men touching an elephant, for those of you familiar with that analogy. Because for many people, it's about how do I take my old applications and simply make them available to others through this ethereal World Wide Web type thing. Data is a key aspect of that, right? And it's beyond simple data access. It's about the analytics. It's about the AI capability and some of the work we're doing today with Google and a number of clients. And I'll share some examples with that. For many, it's about pure security and cyber. Is this reasonable? What's a public cloud versus a private cloud? Am I prepared to really put my customers' data out there where others can access it? Okay. And for others, it's about new capability. And Ken started to talk about sort of low code and no code, and that whole aspect of UI, UX, and how do I start to accelerate delivery and capability in small pieces, not a fundamental corporate shift, because most of us can't absorb those types of things, but how do I start to show the change, show the successes, and continue to move from that standpoint? One of the ways we've found to really get started is something which in KPMG we call design thinking, and Google calls it 10X, and frankly, we've actually combined these two together to get a mix of business and IT people in the room and really start to talk about what are we trying to achieve from a business standpoint. Forget the technology, we'll put all that to the side. But what does it mean to be a bank teller in a digital world? How do I work with an insurance agent? How do I work with a claims handler, right? How do I work with a trader? And so start to look at these personas and start to think through what's changing, how do I want to incrementally develop against that, and challenge people. All can be done very well in a virtual environment. Frankly, the concept of whiteboards and frameworks and all that really starts to play very well into this world. And ultimately, it's developing on a roadmap. Here's where I need to get to first to validate the concepts, to ensure that within my company it's acceptable, within my client base it's acceptable, and frankly, also from a marketing and new demographic standpoint, it's going to open up my capabilities of my company. So as a good example of something Ken and I have been working with a global insurer, it started with a few weeks of design thinking. More of that was actually learning about what they do today. Because if you don't understand what people do today, designing the future is really untethered and frankly untenable. And then getting people in a room and starting to talk about that art of the possible, that unconstrained, where do we want to go? Who do we care about? What do they care about? And ultimately from there, it's saying, okay, let's show something. In the case of this one client we're working at, the first step was simply, hey, can I see my customer data? So it wasn't anything wholly new and innovative. It's customer 360, something we've all been talking about for years and years and years. But believe it or not, it didn't exist in any single format, right? And I see this across many financial services firms. They don't have the capability to look at their customer as a mortgage holder and a savings account holder, right? As a life insurance holder and as a small commercial business. And so putting that together is step one. And then once you have it together, using these new capabilities around analytics and AI to start to show you trends that you weren't aware of. Hey, we're starting to see more fraud-based claims in small business workers' compensation. How do we get on top of that? How do we start to shift the model from that perspective, right? Hey, we're seeing retention issues with this type of demographic, and it's pretty much about servicing, or maybe it's about sort of industry pricing. And so those are those sort of low-hanging fruits that start to show value. Don't change your business model, but now allow you to iterate and move forward against it.
No, that's great. Gary, I think you started answering some of the questions that we're seeing on the thread here around, how do you get started? What are the roadblocks? How do you sell this to leadership? So Rob, maybe from your perspective, I'm sure in your role, you get asked to help leaders think through, how do you get going? How do you make the investments? Where do you get started? How do you sell this to your broader leadership team? What are your perspectives on that?
I think one of the things, I'd say two things, right? So one is to be cognizant of the fact that you need to change, right? And let's be honest, I think there's still a lot of corporate narcissism that exists, right? And call it the blockbuster syndrome, call it whatever, ostrich in the sand, call it deer in the headlights, whatever simile you want to give it. And I'll give you a data point, right? We just ran a survey with finance executives, about 250 finance executives. And we asked that same question, how much is culture holding you back? Only 20% said that culture is holding us back. 80% believe we've got the right culture. Come on, is that that cannot be true, right? And I think that's one of the biggest roadblocks that we have to address, is to recognize the fact that things have moved on and we need to change with it. And without that, no matter what kind of technologies Google brings to bear, or others, or what kind of best practices Gary has, till you recognize the fact that you need to change, nothing is going to move. And I think the other thing that we are seeing is, one of the oldest competency frameworks is this people, process, technology, Todd, right? And those were meant to be equal circles, right? If you look at it as a Venn diagram, people, process, and technology were meant to be equal circles. What has happened is that technology bubble has became so big, and people have forgotten about that people and process, pieces. But honestly, you still have to, you can't forget those. You can keep throwing the best technology at it, but if you've not solved for process, the underlying process, and if you've not solved for what's the talent equation, things are not going to work. And we keep talking about the technical debt, right, for the last 10 years. But why are we not talking about process debt, right? We still live in the same old world of checklists, to get even one thing, go through, there are 100 checks that we have to go through, and those checklists haven't changed for the last 10 years. Uh, so I think I, I think some of those basics are required. We can talk about technology all day long, but till we get to that basics of people, process, technology, all are equal. IT and business needs to work together. They can't be enemies with each other. And perhaps add to that people, process, technology, add data, as Ken and Gary have been talking about. Without, you can have the sexiest algorithms, but if you don't have data, then what do you do with it, right? And then perhaps add change management to that. Change management is still a sort of a line item. It's not embedded in our conversations. And I think those are some of the things that we are seeing is, get back to the basics, understand that you have a problem, and address it, and not just do wishy-washy the veneer has to come off, right? And you've got to look at the real problems.
Oh, that's a good point. And so maybe follow up just real quickly. One of the questions that came in, I think, and starting back with you, but we can get the others as well. Who owns the agenda, right? So Gary, you kind of talked through some business use cases. Ken, you as well. Is it IT that's driving broader? I mean, are organizations just getting up and saying, today's the day I'm going to figure out how I get to the cloud? Is it top down? Is it bottoms up? Is it use case driven? Is it kind of executive alignment? It's probably all the above, but Saurabh, interested in kind of your point on who owns the agenda here.
Yeah, I think the customer should own the agenda. I think if you solve from that, and we've been, for the last 4 or 5 years here at HFS, we've been talking about this concept of the one office. And that's simply saying that all this back office, front office, middle office, IT, business, it doesn't matter. That's how we organize ourselves to work. But the only thing that matters is what the customer says, and there should be only one office that should exist, and that's the office that caters to the customer. And if we can get aligned on that fact, right, that is it a customer problem, is it a burning issue, will it solve for one of the customers or stakeholder issues, right? Employees as big a stakeholder as a customer, right? For example, um, then it doesn't matter. And we are seeing, if you look at some of the best performing enterprises, um, you see there's increasing collaboration, and you see increasing networked style organization structures being created than the erstwhile matrixed and hierarchical organizations. And the idea is to create a community, between IT and business, to sort of collaborate and at least have some common alignment, that uh, that's how you drive the agenda. Otherwise, we keep going down the totem pole of who owns it. And I don't think there's a very simple answer to that, but I think if you can align with the customer pain points, I think that sort of drives the agenda.
Yes. So I guess a lot of questions are coming in on one of the challenges is the sense of privacy and security around data or applications. Ken, maybe I see you nodding your head. You want to take a first cut at that? How do you make, there's a question about healthcare companies and putting PHI rather out on the cloud. I think that is one of the impetus that we see. Kind of thoughts on that more broadly.
Sure. I do want to touch on one quick on the last who owns the agenda before I jump into that, if that's okay. One of the things that we're seeing is CEOs are embracing this conversation more and more. So I do think that we get the annual trip out to California for pre-COVID to see how is it that people are developing applications and transforming. So I do think CEOs are more engaged than ever, at least in my career, especially seeing through the lens of Google, and that each level of the organization is definitely engaged in this journey, and we can empower each level to kind of work together to create this common goal to help advance the customer. So Todd, in terms of security and compliance. We've dealt with that at many different large insurance and financial services companies. It certainly transcends to healthcare. One of the things that we do is we have these things called security blueprints. So the very first thing we do is try to get our CISO with the CISOs of the various different companies, start really trying to understand, how do you protect your data today on-prem? How do you extend that out to the cloud? We have all these relationships with other ISVs and all the leaders in the industry on how you protect your on-prem data. And using these security blueprints, we have a way to extend that out to the cloud. So for all intents and purposes, all your data is protected behind these VPC controls and the security frameworks that you're comfortable with today. We go through a number of different certifications. We do some hacking of the environments to try to make sure it's secure. And then, within 3-6 months, depending upon the velocity of the customer, depending upon, are we doing something on a very, very large scale, or are we again going back to something, Todd, that we want to do in 90 days, 120 days, a more narrow use case? We're able to, I think people are very surprised today. Wow, I didn't know we can secure the data that way. I didn't know it was that protected that quickly. And I didn't know that we can just easily integrate with the stack that you already have on-prem and extend that. So we're able to do it with the security blueprints. We're able to do it with other things and other technologies where we can build things in the cloud very quickly using like container technology, and then shift that actually on-prem to put that behind the firewall so that you can actually have that application that was cloud native, built with 12-factor apps, but then move that with containers behind the firewall to access the data. And depending upon the security posture, you can kind of move that back and forth between different cloud providers. So it's not a problem anymore. It's really just us sitting down and kind of understanding the use case, narrowing down that use case so that you can get to speed, and then focusing on what is the current on-prem posture. We are running PII and all related sensitive data in the cloud today safely. And I guess the last thing I'll say there too is, if you think about Google, AWS, and Azure as the top three, the amount of threat vectors that we see on a daily basis, or in Google with our 10 applications that have 1 billion apps, we're seeing things that most customers just don't see. And we've already figured out a way to treat those and to protect your data. So I would say we're in a good spot now. It's just a matter of like education. It's about integration. And we'd love to have this conversation. This isn't where we were 5 years ago. It's like, oh no, I'm afraid to put stuff in the cloud.
So Gary, maybe over to you. There's a couple different questions on specifically where are we seeing people, like what workloads are moving to the cloud. Maybe give some insurance examples, and how are people thinking about it? Is it a broader end-to-end cloud transformation, or one of the questions is if you're just kind of moving infrastructure, what really changes, right? If you're just kind of moving workload or infrastructure, or taking the same apps and just putting them on the cloud, the cost might come down, but are you really driving that customer centricity that you kind of opined on earlier?
Right. I like to spend time talking about big T transformations versus little T transformations, right? But I'll put that aside for a minute. I want to answer the question you asked earlier, Todd, because I think it's important as where this starts. And yes, the answer is all of the above. But frankly, back to something I said earlier, it's a top of the house discussion. And ultimately, it's a top of the house decision, right? So is the CEO and other leaders ready for this type of change, understanding the environment they're in and where they're heading to? Because otherwise, every company has an innovation lab, right? Or some skunkworks where they have a virtual private cloud or a public cloud up and running. But the ability to actually start moving real business to it requires business ownership and business mandate. And on the cyber side, as Ken was talking about, one of the things I've seen, which is a key success factor, is cyber cannot be an afterthought. And I still see that today in many customers, where They're moving through the stuff and they suddenly realize, oh, we need to go get validation from our information protection group. We need to go get a SOC 1 certification from XYZ. Ultimately, that needs to be upfront in the conversation, same as data, right? And same as application. So two thoughts on Todd on your question. One of the first places that we're starting to see more and more activity, frankly, is internally. Ultimately, my experience has been, and I'd love to get other people dissenting on this, is customers' experiences will never be significantly better than the employee's experience. So there's an initial aspect of how do I further enable my employees to do what they need to do? A little bit safe, right? It's in my four walls or, in my firewalls, et cetera. But it's been a key area of focus. And, from everyone, everyone working through that. Ken talked earlier about some of the call center work in government. We're seeing a lot of that change occur across financial services as well. Because ultimately, while we're pushing to self-service, there's still an aspect of enablement and quick resolution, as well as showing care and comfort for the insured or the customer as a whole. And then what we're starting to see is some small steps. A good example is, we talked about low code, no code, is how do I start to look at some of the manual steps that are out there from a customer standpoint and start to enable those with some very quick engagements to eliminate that manual step, right? To allow me to not have to type in my social security number twice, very simple example, right? And start to gather that piece, or allow me to take a look at the status of my claim without having to call somebody, or to initiate a claim, right? Or to do a query on a new product, or check, I have an insurance company, or my bank company today, I can't see the status of my mortgage, right? Very simple changes. Low code, no code is a great way to sort of get into that environment. I'll also throw out there, though, the caveat is trying to avoid the new legacy. And so really thinking about it from a application standpoint and an infrastructure standpoint is important. Todd talked about sort of the aspect of the physical infrastructure. One of the key drivers here is a pure cost takeout. Can I move to a more virtual world and reduce my overhead? Maybe it's my mainframe, right? My server farms, all those support staffs, and make those put those into other people's worlds where I can variabilize it with the right cyber controls, with the right, all of those other controls, but really start to move against that. The other piece I wanted to bring up, though, is because when I talk to many clients, there's an easy conversation about cloud first. As we move forward, here's what we're going to go do. When we go build this new application, when we go work on this new data model, when we go work on these new risk controls, here's what we're doing. Well, that's all good and well, but it's that legacy world that everyone continues to struggle with, right? Sort of that operating run cost, technical debt, sort of, you used the word earlier, right? How do I start to address what I already have? That's where I see a lot of companies faltering and stumbling and not trying to figure out sort of how to deal with that aspect. It's one thing for an insurance company to move a specialty product, build it out in low code, no code, cloud-based, et cetera. But it's another to move their entire auto platform to that, right? Or to move their mortgage system to that. And so we're seeing a lot more time spent on what do you have today, challenge number one, and what's the best answer for it? There are some great tools out there. Google has capability. KPMG has some models to say, here's where you're going to get the benefit from moving a legacy application, a data component, a servicing aspect onto the cloud. And here's places where you simply need to retire them, or you need to sort of let them sit in a box and run themselves out. And so you really need to look across the board, but absolutely there are some right starting points that get the attention of the business, that start to show value, that then give you the latitude to actually start to drive against the agenda.
Great. So I guess we've in the interest of time, I think we've had a good conversation on just the broad, capital D, capital T digital transformation that we're seeing and the acceleration around that. Talked quite a bit, about getting to the cloud, making the case for that change, where do you get started? Let's maybe talk a little bit about, I'm seeing a lot of questions coming in now on, okay, well, I'm partially in the cloud or I'm in the cloud. How does that change how I'm running the business? So Ken, maybe starting with you, what are you seeing from organizations as they move further into the cloud, are they fundamentally needing to change their IT structure or their IT departments and how they manage things?
Yeah, thanks, Todd. So I think people that have started on this multi-cloud journey, really need to start thinking strategically about, which workloads work best in which cloud that has that unique differentiation. So I think that's one. So it comes back to strategy, right? And one of the things that we're seeing is, like on the data side, multiple different data solutions across a company. So I think you need to start thinking about how do you standardize on a data platform, a next-gen platform that is fully managed. It's not the traditional on-prem with the patching and what have you. So, and then really from a people perspective, really, a lot of employees are excited about cloud. So it's not just a technology. Right? We've been talking about culture, people, training, and technology. Get these people that are dying to work on the cloud side trained up on these cloud technologies. Help them understand on the IT side, and on the business analyst side is where we're seeing a lot of lift. Is train them up on how to use these big data solutions, how to run models within these big data products with literally 3 lines of SQL code, with business analysts can easily do. Reduce the burden on the data science teams, so that the data science teams can work on more difficult, higher value ML models, using TensorFlow and things. So I think you have to really take a step back and start to standardize on, we're gonna go put data in this PaaS platform, and these are the reasons, and this is how we're gonna start building it out from an organizational perspective. This is how we're gonna train our people, and this is what that culture shift means. Gary talked about cloud first. We are seeing our customers talk about, they want to think cloud first, but then you get the legacy stack that kind of drags behind it. So how do we work within the architecture and develop a strategy, which we can easily do, and we are doing, is to kind of show how those two worlds, blend together. And then how do we look at where applications are going to reside next to that data going forward? So right now we have data, applications sitting, on-prem. We have other things moving to the cloud, and things are kind of a little bit all over the place. So I think that we need to take a step back, have folks like KPMG kind of help work on an overall architecture strategy that says, if you're moving your data here, well, then you need to move your app with it. So there's a lift and shift that goes along with that app, and improve while it's in the cloud. But again, a lot of this comes back to, Todd, for me, is what are the business priorities? What is the cost impact to running it the way it is? Kind of when do you want to rip the Band-Aid off and really recognize that from an organizational perspective, it's just not working the way it is. And so Robbie kind of talked about that a little bit earlier, about the denial of, everyone has their little kingdoms, and everybody's trying to do the best they can to provide value to the business, but that's also creating tension and delay, and obviously creating that business value, because everybody's got their little kingdom and they want to keep that kingdom, and they think that they're providing great value. So I think, some of it's strategy, some of it's that next generation of training and transformation with the people and the culture. The tech's there, the tech's ready. The cloud stuff is ready. It's ready right now to consume. And some of these other things that I'm seeing that kind of hold back that adoption, hold back that standardization, that acceleration. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So Rob, anything to add on that? Otherwise, I have a question for you.
Yeah, I think I basically agree with Ken. I think if you look at research across the board, the biggest challenges to technology adoption are not about technology. Let's get that in our heads, right? The number one challenge to technology adoption and to realize value from technology is not technology itself. It's all the other paraphernalia that surrounds it, right? Which we've been talking about, right? Talent, culture, data, mindset, all those things. And I think the only other thing that I'll add is, while we need to move fast and while we need to take, bite-sized pieces and execute on them, there is an architecture or a strategy conversation to be had. Because we've not changed enterprise architectures for the last 20 years. And Todd, we started to have that conversation offline at some point of time. We've never
Yeah,
finished it, but at some point of time, we need to have that conversation.
absolutely.
It's the same enterprise stack that we've been working with, those three boxes, right? And I think that needs to change. There are, like Gary mentioned, cybersecurity or security cannot be an afterthought. There have to be systems of trust that are built into that enterprise architecture. There have to be systems of intelligence that are built into that architecture. And then you figure out, what are the fill in the blanks, what are the gaps that I have, and keep moving them aggressively towards a vision or a strategy or an architecture, whatever word you like. But it can't be a patchwork of things that will ultimately become brittle and that are change resistant. Because we are struggling with this now. Who knows what are we going to struggle next year, right? This is a very volatile world. Um, so I think that's what I'd add to that, if that's helpful.
No, that makes sense, and I do owe you kind of the for folks following along. Saurabh and I had a conversation earlier in the summer to talk about the modern tech stack. We opined that we hadn't necessarily redrawn. For a while there, you had this is your technology landscape on a page, and we used the same picture for 20 years. We've realized that picture is no longer appropriate. Although every time I draw the picture, I talk to several people about it, the picture is wrong. And that's, I'm having a hard time actually getting the right picture to come back with you to opine on, because by the time I get 3 or 4 people to weigh in on it, the tech landscape has changed again. So that is something I think, and more to come on that we're certainly working on, is what does the modern technology, architecture landscape look like? It's not the same 5 layers that we had, 5-10 years ago, and it continues to change. Maybe on that same topic, one of those layers, or I guess one of those abstractions, so to speak, of the more modern view is this concept of low code. And we've gotten some questions on that. We use the term low code. It is I would say, an emerging concept in the marketplace, although some of the underlying technology is not new. I call it the new, not new technology. Saurabh, I know you guys at HFS are kind of leading the charge in defining that market. The question basically is, what is it, and how are you defining it, and what are some of the applications? What are some of the I guess the apps in that landscape? Maybe we can start with you on that.
Yeah. So first of all, there's nothing called no code. So we keep talking about low code, no code. I think there is nothing called no code. I think essentially what you're talking about is low code or less code, right? And that's what this whole market is about. And then we can get into the marketing hype of calling it no code or whatever. But that's a hyperbole. So when we look at that space, and I agree, it's a very, very important space, but it's low code or less code, or some adjective like that first. And I think the basic attractiveness of that for us at HFS is that it allows business to have an equal say and be a participant in IT or technology, right? Because now today, you can't ask me to suddenly become an AI expert. It's just not going to happen, right? No matter what kind of training you give me, I'm just not going to be able to do that. But if I know my business, if I know how to do things, and you ask me to, put a few things together and maybe give me a couple of weeks of training, yes, maybe I can do a little bit of things faster and move those things, move along. And I think so. There are two benefits to this low code movement. One is it allows business to participate very actively in getting some of their problems solved. And then two, it reduces the burden on IT. How many conversations have we had with, I need this IT department, but it's on priority number 27. And we'll get to that in 3 months time, and by that time the needs have changed. So I think that's the basic, for me, in a very simple way, that's what this low code movement is about. And I think we are getting to a state where even machine learning is getting automated, right? I think Google has that auto ML. That's a great example of less code. Now, can you say that I can on day one start using auto ML? No, I can't. But I can probably with a couple of weeks of training do something with it. So I think that comes to my mind, and then you start to look at a lot of automation that's happening where it's drag and drop, where there's some pre-configured codes that are written, and you can drag and drop those things, join those things together. It's sort of like a jigsaw puzzle that you can make and have fun with it, and at the same time increase your productivity. And practically every SaaS provider is starting to offer those services now, in some good, some bad, some ugly, but that's our view on that space, Todd.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I know we're running close on time. There was a question, I'm guessing pointed at either myself or Gary on where is KPMG on its own digital transformation. So I don't want to punt that question. I could probably spend an hour on the investments we're making, but I wouldn't say it's dissimilar to what we've shared here that other organizations are going through, right? So we're a complex organization in that we're providing services to our clients that need to be much more digitally enabled. So that is a big part of our investment. We're also looking at, kind of a post-pandemic, footprint of our offices, how we work more digitally. I think as consultants, we did a pretty good job pre-pandemic of our virtual workforce, but we've had to invest and accelerate in a number of technologies in terms that were much faster than what we typically are comfortable adopting new technology. So we're pivoting our own business. We actually have a senior partner in the firm that owns digital transformation across the enterprise that is focusing on kind of our own operational transformation, as well as kind of our service-based transformation and leading some of our technology charge. So, and in addition to that, doing our own kind of movement to the cloud, starting to move some of the initial pieces to the cloud, and then thinking about kind of our business and operating in the cloud in a very different way. All while security, especially given some of our audit and tax business being a critical concern. So all of these things are top of mind for us as well. So I did want to briefly address that question. So maybe just in wrap up, I'll ask each of you to kind of provide your closing thoughts, and then we'll let folks go. So Ken, starting with you, kind of key takeaways from the conversation or recommendations for folks.
Yeah, so thanks, Todd. I think we're in a culture shift. It's an excellent time to embrace, kind of seize the moment. So the solutions that are available today, similar to what we're saying with the low code, no code, there is no low code. There is no no code. So Rob, you're right. But there are platform as a service solutions where we've abstracted the infrastructure, and all we have to do is build things. So we can do it. It's secure. It's readily available. The API economy is here. So there are all these APIs that companies can expose and consume, tie that back to their big data infrastructure. These things are things that people are doing very, very well. And the folks that are doing that very well are differentiating themselves in the marketplace and are really accelerating. But for other companies to start on that journey or to enhance the journey they're already on, it's available. It's here. It's not as difficult. And I know, Todd, working with you and Gary and KPMG, it's, when we've teamed up together and kind of backed into some of these business problems, I think we surprise a lot of people when they say, wow, we can really do that, in 3 months. So I would say, take the challenge, embrace the moment. It's a terrible time, but it's a good time from a technology point of view to embrace the change. And we would love to help you. And for the rest of the folks out there with friends and family, obviously, be safe to all of you.
Gary.
Sure. Thanks, Todd. So we brought up a number of points, right? And each one deserves many hours of discussion. The realization today is everybody is moving along this path, some faster than others, as Ken mentioned, and differentiating themselves. but it also means that there's some great experiences to leverage against, both from a industry best practices and frankly, here's what not to do. A couple of key points though that I just want to reiterate. One is culture, right? And it came up in every conversation. It is about readiness for change. And it starts at the most senior levels and it works its way down. And so you should be asking yourself, where is my company going? What do my leaders think of? And by the way, as part of any one of these projects, how am I bringing along the company as opposed to simply the science fair? MVPs are easy, right? Deployment is hard. And so something to necessarily consider and look at. The second piece of it is this migration to cloud and to digital is multifaceted. It isn't just about AI. It isn't just about low code, no code. It isn't just about cyber, right? It's about looking at this holistically and finding pieces and parts to do that. We've all been on this journey for years, right? Back from when we started to put our HR systems in the cloud. Interesting place to start, don't you think? But ultimately, how do you start to move forward against that? And then the third piece, again, just bringing it all back around, is having a plan is very important here. So we talked about sort of a business plan and roadmap like design thinking and 10X, but even more importantly, from an application architecture, solution architecture standpoint, starting to say, where am I heading? What am I using this for? And how do I plan to leverage it across the enterprise? Departmental solutions are easy. As I mentioned, the MVP component is easy, but creating the new legacy is even easier. So it's really starting to think about this from a big T transformation, right? From a big D digital standpoint and saying, this is where we're pivoting as a company from a technology, from an interaction, from a capability standpoint is very important. You don't have to go deep, but you have to start thinking about it and starting to look how these pieces and parts come together. Thanks.
Great, thank you. And Saurabh, do you want to close out for us?
Yeah, no, I think this was an awesome conversation. I learned a lot today. I wouldn't say I'm a cloud expert now, but I'm getting closer. So I learned. Thank you, Gary, Todd, Ken, for sharing your views. I think I just say that, you know, we are scared by the scarcity, but actually we are living in a world of abundance. You know, you look at computing power, you look at the technologies, you look at, you know, the Googles of the world are churning out one new technology practically every day. You know, so we are living in a world of abundance. And I think the challenge for us is a problem of plenty. You know, how do you manage those plentiful resources? And I think the best way to go about it is collaborate, right? Collaborate internally, collaborate. IT and business needs to collaborate, and collaborate externally. Not everything has to be a trade secret, right? And I think the more that you reach out to friends, family, peers, even competitors, we are living in an open sourced world, not just from a technology perspective, but from every other aspect of society. And I think while, you know, we are socially distant, this is the best time to collaborate with each other, you know, and that's I think is in a nutshell. You know, we all need to learn. There is no stopping to learn. We all can learn, and there are a lot of resources out there for you to get more insights into this. You know, whether it's KPMG, whether it's Google, you know, it's phenomenal and exciting how open people are today to talk about their experiences than they were 5 years back. So I think let's make use of that. Let's, you know, not get stuck in our silos, and let's expand our thinking and, you know, make use of what we have. But thanks everyone for joining. I think this was an awesome conversation, and we'll have this recording on HFS. I know we took a lot of questions, but there are still tons that we did not. So we'll follow up offline between the four of us. We'll divide and conquer and try and answer as many questions. But thanks again, Ken, Todd, Gary. Great job. Thanks.
Great. Thanks all. Have a great day.
Take care now.